Our story begins with a man who spent $80 million of a bank's accidental transfer on unfinished buildings, all because he had been rejected for a loan 36 times. His phone had suddenly received a notification for $80 million from a government project. Anyone who has ever handled such money knows the rules. You don't touch it, or you go to jail. But in that moment, Chunyang awakened a debt-defying system where owing $10,000 a month equals 1 point. Looking at the system's life-changing technology, he realized that if he could just keep this debt, he'd have a goose that lays golden eggs. The money itself wasn't important, the debt was. But if he couldn't find a way to keep it, he would lose everything. With the potential to become a tech tycoon, Chunyang began to ponder how to keep the debt by spending $80 million as fast as possible. Bank transfers were out, and normal spending was too easy to trace. Even buying cars or houses took too long and could be reversed. But then, he had a thought. Buying a house seemed viable after all. Chunyang's eyes lit up as a plan formed. New houses were unreliable because the transactions were too slow. Unfinished buildings, however, were a different story. Those developers were already drowning in debt and on the verge of jumping off roofs. To be honest, they were desperate. If the money reached their hands, it would vanish in 5 minutes. With so many creditors chasing them, the bank would have a hard time getting it back. The key was whether the developer, once their debts were settled, would take out more loans to finish the building. If they did, it wouldn't be a loss. Even if the developer ran away, he would have already earned his system points. Once those points were in hand, he wouldn't lose out, no matter what. He could handle jail or repaying the debt later. It was the 21st. If he could just stall for 9 days, he'd earn 8,000 points. Chunyang pulled out his phone. He asked his group chat if anyone knew where to find unfinished buildings. Sun Miao from the finance department, who had just received 20,000 from Chunyang, was curious. Feeling quite good about Chunyang lately, she wondered why he was asking. I'm planning to buy a house, Chunyang replied simply. The group chat exploded. Are you crazy? Even if you have money to burn, buying a ruin is like throwing it into the sea without even a splash. Others chimed in, asking where he even got the money since he was always borrowing. Chunyang replied that he had a small amount, not enough for a normal home. He figured he'd look for a cheap, unfinished project on the off chance it might be finished. You're dreaming, they said. Save your money for your illness. While everyone was trying to talk him out of it, his phone rang. It was Sun Miao. Are you really serious about buying an unfinished house? She asked. Chunyang laughed, saying he didn't have much money and just wanted to take a chance. Sun Miao took a breath, clearly thinking he had lost his mind. Sun Miao told him that if he wanted to buy, he should look at Henjia Lanxian, but warned him not to ask for more details. Chunyang's eyebrows shot up. He knew she had inside information. He didn't press her for more. Instead, we see him searching the web for Henjia Lanxian, a project by Royal Estate, which had been making quite a few headlines lately. The project was trending for all the wrong reasons. Rumors suggested the developer was too greedy, launching multiple projects until their capital chain finally snapped. One particular complex had failed to sell, and with loans coming due, they began siphoning funds from other projects to fill the financial hole. The hole only grew deeper, new loans were denied, and work stopped at every site. The once bustling sales offices became ghost towns overnight. A work stoppage meant the buildings might never be finished, which meant no one would buy them. And without sales, there was no money to resume construction. The project had been stuck in this death spiral for a long time. Word was that the developer, Wang Yaozu, had another massive loan due very soon. He was broke, facing a choice between jumping off a roof or skipping town. Naturally, the homeowners were panicking, and the internet was flooded with their protests. After finding the sales office number, Chunyang gave them a call. A woman's crisp voice answered, and he simply stated that he wanted to buy a house. The woman was stunned, asking him to repeat himself. He calmly told her he believed their boss could pull through, and he was ready to buy. Yes, he was actually going through with it. Wang Yaozu was incredulous when he heard the news. A buyer wanted multiple units and was asking for the price. He demanded the caller's number immediately. He had seen many fools in his time, but never one who actively sought out a sinking ship. To be honest, this seemed more like a death wish than an investment. A little later, a strange number appeared on Chunyang's screen. He answered, and Wang Yaozu's voice came through, thick with suspicion, asking if he really wanted to buy. Chunyang confirmed it coolly, asking for the current price of the units. Wang Yaozu wasn't convinced. He suspected Chunyang was just trying to stir up trouble. The developer decided to be blunt. He admitted that a $300 million loan was about to expire, and he had already borrowed every cent he could. He was already preparing to sell the project. He told Chunyang that if he was an existing owner, he shouldn't worry about the ruins, as the Yunhai Group would take over. However, the owners would likely have to pay a supplementary fee to the new company to get the buildings finished. Wang Yaozu still couldn't believe a new buyer existed. Chunyang's interest peaked at the mention of the Yunhai Group. He had heard the Qi family was looking to enter real estate, and it seemed the rumors were true. It appeared they were playing a dirty game to force a takeover. For Chunyang, however, this was the perfect moment to strike while the iron was hot. When Chunyang thought of President Lin's arrogant, crooked smile, he couldn't help but feel amused. This was the perfect target. He asked Wang Yaozu if he was truly resigned to this fate. Resigned? Wang Yaozu cursed loudly, venting his frustration at being set up while admitting he was utterly helpless. He told Chunyang that even if they were in contact, there was nothing he could do. He insisted that as a businessman, he had always operated with integrity and his past projects were well regarded. We see him urging Qinyang to go and verify his reputation for himself. He felt he had no choice but to accept his defeat, claiming that even if the homeowners killed him, he simply didn't have the money. He assumed Qinyang was just another angry owner. He promised that in 2 years, he would repay whatever supplementary fees they had to pay Yunhai Group. Deep down, Qinyang realized the man actually had a bit of a conscience. Qinyang told him to come over, insisting he was serious about buying and that his money might actually be enough to help. To be honest, it was a bold claim to make to a desperate man. Wang Yaozu gave a bitter laugh, telling him that even buying 10 apartments wouldn't solve a problem of this magnitude. That was when Qinyang calmly mentioned he had 80 million. The developer froze at the mention of 80 million, asking if he was serious. He declared that for that amount, he would sell Qinyang an entire building outright. That meant 11 floors, 2 units, and 44 apartments, including parking spaces and storage rooms. However, he warned that this wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about offending the wrong people, a move that could literally lead to a long walk off a short roof. Qinyang took a sharp breath, realizing the stakes were higher than he thought. He knew the location was a bit remote, but the future potential was immense. Originally, these units sold for 2.6 million each, plus another 100,000 for parking and storage. In a typical bundled sale, each unit would have cost 2.8 million. Buying an entire building for 80 million was, quite frankly, the deal of a lifetime. Regarding the transfer, Wang Yaozu noted that since the loan was from the main bank and they were desperate for payment, they would be willing to process it even in the middle of the night. Qinyang then asked if the man could actually protect the money once it was recovered. Wang Yaozu hesitated for a long moment, wondering if he was dealing with dirty funds. Qinyang simply asked if the source really mattered at this point. Wang Yaozu pondered this for a second before deciding that 80 million was worth any risk. They agreed to meet immediately, as every passing minute increased the risk of the deal falling through. Qinyang gave him the address and ended the call. 15 minutes later, a knock came at the door. When Qinyang opened it, he found himself face to face with a rather stout man. This was the same man Qinyang had seen online, once celebrated as one of Yongqing's outstanding entrepreneurs. He had brought 2 men with him, likely as bodyguards just in case. Qinyang gestured toward the sofa and handed over his bank card, telling Wang Yaozu that the next move was up to him. The developer looked disheveled, his hair unwashed and his appearance far from his former glory. He sat down heavily and began the process of verifying the funds in Qinyang's account. After verifying the funds, Wang Yaozu pulled out his phone and began making calls, telling a certain brother Lu that he finally had the money to pay him back. He asked for just 30 minutes of his time, explaining that a large transfer was coming in and he needed a special authorization to process it immediately. After promising to buy the man a drink later, he hung up and gave Qinyang a respectful nod before dialing several more numbers in quick succession. He told a man named Qiangzi that the company's debt would be settled, but he needed to borrow the funds back momentarily to prove he had a way out of this mess. Next, he called a brother Gao, explaining that he needed to route a specific sum through his accounts under the guise of a loan repayment to keep things legal. He reassured his contacts not to worry, as it was merely a matter of balancing the books. Meanwhile, Qinyang received a notification on his own device. The message confirmed that his application for a temporary large-sum transfer was now active, giving him a 2-hour window to complete the transaction. The bank's automated message even wished him a prosperous business, which, under the circumstances, felt a bit ironic. Wang Yaozu reached out for the phone. He opened the banking app and rapidly entered his own account details. Moments later, his own phone buzzed with the confirmation of the massive transfer. He then began a complex series of transfers to various accounts, moving sums ranging from a few million to 2 separate payments of over 20 million each. A few minutes passed as a steady stream of notification pings filled the room. We see Wang Yaozu checking each one with intense, focused eyes. The money he had sent out began returning to him as loans, which he then funneled into his company's main account to settle outstanding bank debts. Once the digital paper trail was complete, he scrolled through his call history and dialed Brother Lu again to confirm the bank had received the payment. He laughed with genuine relief, telling the man he had finally met a benefactor. They agreed to meet in 2 days to discuss a new, legitimate loan. After a few more pleasantries, he hung up. The developer looked like a man who had just been pulled back from the edge of a cliff. Despite his beaming smile, his forehead was drenched in sweat, betraying the immense pressure he had been under. He thanked Qinyang profusely. He told the young man never to hesitate if he needed a favor in the future. Then, he signaled his bodyguards to hand over a thick folder of contracts. He urged Qinyang to look them over, assuring him that if everything looked correct, they could finalize the deal right then and there. He knew that if he didn't sign now, the bank wouldn't let a man of his stature off the hook so easily. It was a desperate gamble for both of them. For Qinyang, the next step was simply handling the bank's recovery process. And so, with a steady hand, he began signing the documents. After they both pressed their thumbprints and stamped the seals, each taking a copy, the deal was officially closed. But Old Wong couldn't help but feel a lingering curiosity about the source of the money. He asked if it was something he could share, and Qin Yang replied quite casually that the bank had simply transferred the funds to him by mistake. Naturally, Old Wong didn't believe a word of it. Then, Qin Yang opened his messages to show him the proof. Old Wong sucked in a breath of cold air, giving him a thumbs up while calling him a truly ruthless man for what he was doing. He warned that this could lead to prison, which explained why Qin Yang wasn't afraid of offending anyone. Qin Yang simply smiled, hinting that his time behind bars wasn't a certainty at all. He explained that since it was municipal money, the bank couldn't just let it go. Once his own portion was spent, it was actually Old Wong's money that the bank would be coming after. The realization hit Old Wong like a physical blow, especially since he was the one who helped authorize the large transfer. To be honest, he was starting to feel his skin crawl at the implications. He had assumed the funds were embezzled or from an offshore account, the kind of money you can tie up in court for years. But this was bank money, and from a local branch no less. The situation was explosive. He suddenly regretted everything, realizing that his contact, Old Lu, was now implicated too. Their chances of getting future loans to finish the buildings were vanishing. Qin Yang urged him to look at the bright side. He pointed out that since Old Wong and his bank contacts were now in the same sinking boat, the bank was desperate to recover the missing municipal funds. Since the money was already gone, the bank's only real option was to lend Old Wong even more money. They needed him to actually finish those houses, so there would be assets to seize. Once the buildings were completed, everyone would survive the crisis. The unfinished projects would vanish, and Old Wong would have successfully navigated the greatest disaster of his career. Even the Yunhai group would have to think twice before moving against him, as he'd have the bank, the city, and the homeowners behind him. It was, quite frankly, a brilliant bit of leverage. By the time the houses were sold, the value of the building Qin Yang just bought would double. The bank would recover its funds with interest, making it a win for everyone involved. He asked rhetorically who wouldn't trade 80 million now for 150 million in a year. He was confident he wouldn't see a jail cell, as everyone now had a vested interest in a bright future. As the logic settled in, Old Wong looked at the young man with a newfound sense of dread and respect. There was something undeniably wicked about the way Qin Yang operated. With nothing but a banking error, he had seized the perfect moment to intervene in the struggle between Yunhai Group and Wang's real estate. It was a masterclass in high-stakes gambling. Wang Yaozu's gaze shifted. Later, as he sat in the back of his Mercedes on the way home, the more he thought about Qin Yang, the more he realized how unfathomable the young man truly was. He muttered to himself about how incredible it was. Imagine taking a simple bank mistake and spinning it into a web of influence and power. It was simply unheard of. His bodyguard, unable to contain his curiosity, asked if the kid was really that dangerous. Old Wong replied that he was far more formidable than he looked to the naked eye. He told his men they only saw the surface, the risk, and the greed. But with these methods, the day Qin Yang supposedly goes to prison would be the day his name becomes legendary. Old Wong mused that in today's society, once you have a name, you have everything. Qin Yang could use his terrifying calculations to rise from the ashes whenever he pleased. There would be no shortage of people willing to invest in him during his low points, or companies inviting him to be an executive, eventually cementing his status as a true elite. Even in the worst-case scenario, this stunt alone would make him a famous influencer capable of raking in a fortune. And to be honest, he really might not even go to prison. Old Wong admitted that if it weren't for the risk of being suspected as an accomplice, he'd want to hire the boy himself. His bodyguard was stunned, having underestimated the young man. The guard realized this wasn't just cleverness, but profound wisdom, a man who treats himself as a chess piece to manipulate the entire board. It was truly a bold gamble. Old Wong nodded solemnly, telling his man that as long as he understood, he must keep quiet about today. His boss's orders were clear, not a word of this leaves the car. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a voice cried out in disbelief that the payment hadn't been received. It seemed impossible. She had checked every single digit, yet the error was catastrophic. 8 digits were different between the two accounts, and she had gotten them all wrong. Panic set in as she promised to come over immediately to handle the mess. We see a young woman in a traditional Chinese-style courtyard. It took less than a minute for her supreme confidence to crumble into absolute, frantic terror. Her father asked what was wrong, and with a pale face, she confessed she had ruined everything by transferring 80 million to the wrong account. The middle-aged man frowned slightly, but then nodded with a calm, unbothered air. He told her to remember this lesson and to be more careful in the future. He reassured her that money doesn't just vanish in a thin air, they would simply get it back. He told her not to worry. If she was criticized, she should just accept it. Even if she was fired, she could just find another job. He reminded her that rushing solves nothing, and that one must always think twice before acting. The girl felt her head throb at the lecture she had heard 1,000 times. She quickly put on her shoes, grabbed her keys, and hurried out the door. We returned to Qin Yang, whose phone was vibrating incessantly. He looked at the unknown number and hit the speakerphone, only to hear a soft, anxious voice. She sounded young, her voice trembling slightly. Qin Yang identified himself, and the girl politely introduced herself, apologizing for the intrusion at such an hour. She explained that 2 hours ago, she had made a mistaken transfer. She had just checked and saw the money was already gone, and she desperately needed to know its status. Despite her panic, she remained incredibly polite. Chunyang felt a twinge of guilt, knowing her job was likely forfeit, and he resolved to find a way to compensate her later. He calmly informed her that he had bought an unfinished housing project, specifically the buildings at Henjia Lanxian, since the developer had run out of money to continue. He explained that he used the 80 million to buy all the units, so the developer would have the funds to finish. He told her not to worry, he'd pay it back once they sold. The girl sounded utterly stunned, her voice bordering on tears as she pleaded with him not to joke. She asked what would happen if the project stayed abandoned and they never finished building. Chunyang couldn't resist teasing her, suggesting that since the bank already let 80 million slip out, they might as well chip in a bit more to save the project. It was a bold suggestion, to say the least. The girl grew frantic, insisting they only handle finance, not real estate. Suddenly, the line erupted into chaotic noise as the phone was snatched away by someone else. A stern voice introduced himself as Zhao Jiangwo, the president of the Yongqing branch. He wasted no time with pleasantries, warning Chunyang that keeping the money was illegal and would lead to prison. Chunyang remained remarkably calm, simply telling the man to come and get him. He admitted that when he started this, he had already made peace with the idea of going to jail. He even provided his exact address, 6th floor, Unit 6, on Manhwa Street, and told them to call the police. President Zhao was fuming, accusing him of being a deadbeat who was determined to break the law. Chunyang told him not to get so worked up, as anger wouldn't solve anything. He suggested the president think it over or just report it, leaving the man on the other end momentarily speechless. Seeing no further point in the conversation, Chunyang hung up to let the man cool down. To be honest, his level of arrogance was reaching truly impressive heights. We moved to the conference room of the Yongqing branch, where the atmosphere was thick with tension. Some looked bewildered, others dark-faced, while most just tried to look uninvolved. The young woman, Mian Yang, sat in her chair looking completely dazed and worried sick. President Zhao, meanwhile, was trembling with rage that such a massive error had even occurred. He pointed a shaking finger at the girl, noting that if this reached the higher-ups, it wouldn't just be her career on the line. The entire branch would suffer the consequences. Someone asked if they should call the police immediately, but President Zhao paused to think. He realized that an ordinary person shouldn't have been able to transfer such a massive sum so easily. He suspected there might be an insider helping Chunyang. He ordered an immediate investigation into Wang Yaozu's accounts to see exactly where that money had vanished to. He knew they couldn't hide this forever, but if they could recover the funds quickly, the authorities might be lenient. After all, on paper, it was just a clerical error involving a large sum. The room went cold at the mention of an insider. It was a heavy accusation, and everyone instinctively turned their gaze toward the young woman who had made the transfer. Her face went pale as she realized that a simple work mistake was being reframed as a criminal conspiracy. If she were labeled an accomplice, her life would be effectively over. But in that moment, no one cared about her feelings. President Zhao slammed the table, ordering everyone to get to work, and soon, the data began piling up on his desk. As he looked over the files, his expression shifted to one of pure disbelief. The others gathered around, equally stunned by the sheer speed of the transactions they were seeing. The money had been moved out of the account in less than 20 minutes. It was a level of decisiveness that suggested Chunyang knew exactly what he was doing from the start. Within a single minute of the funds arriving, they had been split into 8 different corporate accounts. 2 of them weren't just small firms. They were major players from the provincial capital. Among the recipients were several local firms right here in Yongqing. When we called to inquire, they claimed the money was for debts Wang Yaozu owed them. However, our investigation into Wang Yaozu and his corporate accounts revealed that within minutes, those same 8 companies sent the money right back. They transferred the funds back to Wang Yaozu's company account 8 separate times, disguised as new loans. We then learned that the person who authorized this loan was Vice President Liu from the head office. According to the records, it was his doing. Vice President Liu had personally called a colleague at the head office to authorize the temporary limit increase for Chunyang's account. The room was stunned. President Zhao looked completely bewildered. Realizing the insider was actually his superior, he immediately pulled out his phone to make a call. Vice President Liu was his old mentor who had risen from this very branch. If the boss went down, Zhao would likely follow. "Old leader, you're in trouble," he blurted out. He quickly added that he wasn't joking or trying to curse him. The situation was simply that dire. Meanwhile, at the head office in Yongqing, Vice President Liu was nearly bursting with rage as he dialed a number of his own. He felt like he was on the verge of a stroke. "You idiot. Why did you make me authorize a transfer for stolen funds? Are you insane?" he roared. Old Wang's voice came through the line, eerily calm. He told Liu that this was his only way to survive, so being insane was a matter of perspective. Liu tried to distance himself, arguing that the one who denied the loan and pressured for repayment was another vice president named Zhou. Wang didn't care who started it. He told Liu they were both in the same hole now. They would either survive together or go down together. Liu hissed that if this went public, his career was over. But Wang countered, telling him there was still a way out, then explained Chunyang's plan. He pointed out that Lu was already in deep water and had no other choice. Besides, if they finished the building, it would be worth 150 million. If the bank took it, Lu would be a hero. If a private buyer took it, there was a $70 million profit to be made in a year. If they could just transition through this smoothly, Wang, Lu, the branch, and even Qinyang would be safe. Everyone would have a bright future. To be honest, Wang hated selling a whole building for only 80 million, but with the Yunhai Group breathing down his neck, he had to survive first. If Qinyang hadn't appeared like a wild card, Wang's fate would have been sealed. Hearing this, Vice President Lu fell into a thoughtful silence. Previously, he wouldn't have dared to help. He wanted the profit, of course, but taking it meant offending the powerful Yunhai Group. As one of the pillar enterprises in Yongcheng, Wang knew that at this stage, his only real option was to make a scene. He had to cause a stir. Without their collective pressure, Qinyang wouldn't be able to profit, which meant there was still room to negotiate. They could discuss earning a bit less, or perhaps ask what conditions the other side had. After all, everything was negotiable. However, the involvement of the Yunhai Group made Vice President Lu look troubled again. He reminded Wang of the group's massive influence in the province. With just a flick of their fingers, Wang had nearly faced bankruptcy. Lu felt he couldn't withstand that kind of pressure alone. But Wang countered that he had to stand firm, or they were both dead. This was the stage Qinyang had set, and he wasn't about to let a young man look down on him. With a bitter laugh and an apology to Lu, Wang decided to go all in. Vice President Lu finally slammed the table, his resolve hardening. He realized that at his level, they couldn't just fire him. He had his own connections who could withstand the pressure for a share of the profit. Lu promised to approve the loan immediately. Old Wang laughed heartily, confident that he still held some sway in his home turf of Yongcheng. He noted that the Yunhai Group had exhausted all their local favors on this scheme. To him, they were just a bottled water company playing at real estate. In his eyes, they lacked the deep roots and heritage required to truly dominate this particular industry. The next morning, President Zhao Zhengguo hung up the phone with a sigh of relief. He turned to face the expectant crowd at the branch. Everyone was staring at him, desperate for an answer. Zhao smiled and announced that the matter was settled. Someone would arrive tomorrow morning. He promised to accompany them personally, assuring the staff that the branch's reputation was safe. He then told everyone to finally go home and rest. A collective sigh of relief filled the room as the long day finally ended. Among them, the girl in the sheep-patterned coat, Lu Wangshu, looked at Zhao expectantly. Zhao Zhengguo thought for a moment before telling Lu Wangshu that she should head home first and reflect on everything that had happened. When she arrived home and turned on the lights, she found her father still sitting on the sofa, clutching his phone. "Dad," she whispered, her eyes welling up. Feeling a mix of warmth and grievance, she sat down beside him. Her father, ever calm and composed, simply asked if the matter had been resolved. She wasn't entirely sure if it was over, but she recounted the entire sequence of events to him in detail. It was quite the story, to be honest. The middle-aged man chuckled softly after a moment of reflection. It seemed the Qi family of the Yunhai Group had ended up with nothing but a handful of air. It was actually a good thing. The owners at Wangshu Real Estate had been protesting for days, and a self-resolved issue is always better. "You're still laughing?" "I was scared to death," Lu Wangshu said. She spoke with urgent frustration, explaining that they even suspected an insider was involved. She had nearly been labeled an accomplice, which would have ruined her father's reputation as well. The middle-aged man raised his voice with a hint of dominant authority, only to soften it immediately with a laugh to comfort his daughter. He assured her that the situation wouldn't hold up under scrutiny. He told her to rest easy, though she sighed, worried that her job was still on the line. Lu Wangshu wasn't sure how things would develop, but her father simply smiled and stood up. He noted that where there is profit, someone will always try to claim it. Previously, no one dared move because of the Yunhai Group's prestige, but the situation had changed. A bold young man had essentially ground the Yunhai Group's reputation into the dirt, and now others would lose their reservations. Wangshu Real Estate had lost money, but they had survived the crisis. To her father, that loss was a small price for survival. As for the boy named Qinyang, whether he realized it or not, he had deeply offended the Yunhai Group. The aftermath was simple. Things would return to normal for now, with Yunhai suffering a massive loss while Wangshu gained everything. As for Qinyang himself, whether he ended up profiting or losing would depend entirely on his own perspective. It was a strange turn of events, to be sure, driven by a series of remarkable coincidences. We returned to the rental apartment, where Qinyang waited quite a while for the police, but no one ever knocked. Realizing the coast was clear, he ordered takeout and settled in for the night. He spent a few hours on his phone learning about this new world before heading to bed early. Reflecting on the day's events, it all felt like a surreal dream. The next morning, Qinyang woke up early, feeling more refreshed than he had in a long time. It seems a full night's sleep did wonders for his spirit. After washing up, he cooked some noodles and turned on the television. The local Yongqing morning news was just beginning, with the anchor greeting the audience as usual. The broadcast started with the daily headlines, and for a moment, it felt as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened the day before. But just then, a knock at the door broke the silence. Qinyang turned off the TV and went to open it, finding two strangers waiting for him. There stood a young man and a middle-aged man. The younger one introduced himself as Hu Guangyu, offering a hand and a polite smile. He was thin and dressed in a well-tailored suit, radiating a gentle and elegant demeanor. Qinyang smiled back and invited the two men inside. Seeing how simple and sparse the rental room was, the visitors grew even more curious about this young man who could remain so calm while doing such big things. He seemed to have everything under control, guiding events with a steady hand. To take an accident this far without fear, but with total confidence instead, and to remain so calm and composed, it made them wonder, was this really a child of an ordinary family? What was the source of his hidden strength? While they were surprised and impressed, they also felt a growing sense of worry. With a person like this, the upcoming negotiation would likely not be easy. Qinyang invited them to sit and asked what they'd like to drink. A coffee. Actually, plain water is fine, Hu Guangyu said, catching himself mid-sentence. He realized that asking for coffee in a rental like this was essentially making things difficult. Qinyang looked at his kettle, realized the water wasn't boiled, and instead pulled 2 large bottles of iced black tea from beside the sofa. He smiled, offering them the party-sized drinks. Does this even count as tea? Zhao Jiangwo remained silent, but Hu Guangyu didn't seem to mind at all. He admitted he loved this stuff back in school and hadn't had it in years. One has to admit, compared to a second-generation businessman like Qi Yuming, Hu Guangyu was far more mature. You didn't come just for tea, did you? Qinyang saw that Hu Guangyu was being respectful, so he decided to get straight to the point. He liked this man's approach. The situation was technically an error involving illegal gains. They had decided that since a mistake was made, they should try to compensate the city's funds. They would make the payment again, the matter would be settled, and he wouldn't go to jail, but the building would return to them. That seemed fair, didn't it? Qinyang simply smiled at the proposal. He suggested that he could be the one to compensate them instead. He'd keep the building and pay them 80 million. Zhao Jiangwo fell silent, but Hu Guangyu gave a helpless sigh. He told his companion to stop testing the boy, as Qinyang clearly wasn't a fool. A building worth 150 million in a year wasn't something one just gives away. Besides, if they pushed this legally, Qinyang wouldn't be the only one in trouble. He explained he was there to help Zhao and Vice President Liu solve their problem. Profit was secondary. Since they were all in the same boat, they should speak frankly. He looked directly at Qinyang. This matter involved the Yunhai Group, and the pressure was more than the local branch or Vice President Liu could handle alone. If Qinyang refused to let go, the result would be mutual destruction. The Yongqing branch would suffer, and the head office would face the consequences. Uncle Liu would be ousted, Qinyang would go to jail, and the housing project would remain a ruin, which, ironically, would only benefit the Yunhai Group. His own father could withstand the pressure, but offending people was never ideal. He asked Qinyang for his conditions, promising to agree if they were reasonable. That was the right way to talk. Qinyang smiled, glanced at Zhao Jiangwo, and admitted that he actually had no real interest in the building itself. Qinyang explained that while the building didn't interest him, the debt certainly did. He proposed a loan of 80 million. If they lent him that, the building would be theirs by this time next year. Once the building sold for 150 million, he would repay the 80 million with interest. It was, in his mind, a deal with no strings attached where they would make a pure profit. That's impossible, Hu Guangyu said, shaking his head with a helpless smile. It wasn't that he didn't trust the boy, but the simple fact was that Qinyang had absolutely no business experience. He joked that if he lent 80 million, he feared he wouldn't even see 80,000 back. Instead, he offered his own terms, 10 million in cash right now. If Qinyang transferred the building, all future legal headaches would vanish. He would walk away with 10 million in pure profit. Not a bad result for a simple accident, wouldn't we agree? To most, turning a mistake into a $10 million fortune would be the story of a lifetime. But for Qinyang, as we are about to see, the money itself was secondary. He thought it over. 10 million was a lot, but it was earned money, not debt. Without debt, he wouldn't earn system points, and without points, he couldn't unlock new technology. And without that technology, what would he even do with 10 million? Trying to start a real business without an edge would be foolish. He'd likely lose every cent in the end. Qinyang had a very clear understanding of his own limits. He knew he could get rich by crushing the competition with tech, but playing the traditional business game would lead to certain ruin. He was too young to match the schemes of seasoned businessmen, and he had no desire to lose his conscience by cheating customers when he had such a bright future ahead. The two men reached a stalemate, neither satisfied with the other's proposal. I have an idea, Zhao Jiangwo suddenly interjected, offering a potential way out. Both Hu Guangyu and Qinyang turned to him, curious about this sudden suggestion. Zhao Jiangwo pointed at Hu Guangyu, telling him he would get the building. Then he pointed at Qinyang, saying he would get his 10 million. Seeing their confused expressions, Zhao Jiangwo quickly moved to the most important part of his plan. He suggested that Qinyang use that money to set up an industry, ideally something impressive sounding, but difficult to actually value. Then, he could use that as collateral. By using that industry to apply for a loan from their bank, the plan became feasible. Qinyang raised an eyebrow, finding the idea quite intriguing. With Hu Guangyu's father involved, the paperwork could be managed. As long as it wasn't too obvious, no one would find a flaw. But there was one major catch. Hu Guangyu looked at Qinyang with a serious warning. If they went through with this, Qinyang would truly be 80 million in debt. In a high-stakes play like this, the interest rates would be incredibly high. If he could actually leverage that wealth into something bigger, fine. But if he just ran a normal business, the interest would swallow him whole. He urged the boy to think twice before acting, as one wrong move could land him in prison for real. Don't worry, I have confidence, Qinyang replied with a nod. Zhao Jiangwo added one final condition. Since such a large sum was involved under these very special circumstances, he would need to oversee the process personally. To ensure everything stayed above board, Zhao Jiangwo insisted that no matter what business Qinyang started, the accountant had to be from the bank. And to prevent any accidents, the bank would provide 2 bodyguards at their own expense. Finally, he added the most critical point. If the business suffered large-scale losses, the bank could demand immediate repayment. Good heavens, Qinyang couldn't help but look at Zhao Jiangwo with newfound respect. With their person managing the books, the money couldn't be spent recklessly. It had to be used properly. And with their bodyguards watching his every move, he was essentially under constant supervision, which, to be honest, was a very clever way to protect an $80 million investment. But for Qinyang, none of that actually mattered. The only thing that truly counted was the points he would earn at the end of the month to exchange for technology. Once he had that, he could start crushing the competition. Losing money? That was absolutely impossible. Imagine a technological strike so advanced it's like playing a card game where you have nothing but trump cards. No matter what the opponent plays, you win. Exactly. He held a handful of jokers. So how could he possibly lose? Let's sign the contract, he said. Seeing that Qinyang agreed, Zhao Jiangwo didn't waste any more words. He produced the prepared documents and then pulled out a blank sheet of paper. He told the boy not to worry about them changing their minds later. He would provide a personal guarantee. He wrote a letter of commitment stating that if they went back on their word, he would go to prison alongside him. He finished with a flourish, adding his thumbprint and signature. He handed it to Qinyang, warning him that no one else must ever see it. If the terms were acceptable, he would seal it up until the loan process was complete. Once the loan was finalized, the letter had to be returned unopened. He needed to be certain it hadn't been copied, as that would be a dangerous liability for a bank official. Zhao Jiangwo spoke with great solemnity. Qinyang looked it over for a moment before nodding his approval. Go ahead and seal it, he agreed, and Zhao Jiangwo followed suit. He took a special envelope, folded the commitment letter, and tucked it inside before sealing it tight. Qinyang noticed something peculiar about the process. The glue had a sharp, pungent odor, suggesting it was a specialized security adhesive. There would be no way to open it without visibly damaging the envelope. A clever precaution, indeed. With that settled, the main contract was pushed forward. Qinyang signed his name with quick, confident strokes, and then he and Hu Guangyu both added their thumbprints. A pleasure doing business, Hu Guangyu said, letting out a long sigh of relief as he immediately transferred $10 million to Qinyang's account. Qinyang stood to see them out, but as they departed, his expression clouded slightly. He couldn't help but think about the Yunhai group. This move had certainly made them an enemy. In fact, he had just offended them quite thoroughly. Having been an employee there in his past life, he knew exactly what kind of beast he was poking. Yunhai Group wasn't some small-time outfit. It was a massive conglomerate spanning multiple industries with a market value in the tens of billions. A true titan of the domestic private sector. They were a top 500 private enterprise, primarily focused on beverages like mineral water, fruit sodas, and juices. Beyond that, they produced health foods, canned goods, snacks, and instant meals. In his previous life, Qinyang had been a technical specialist there, developing those very snacks. Back then, the Yunhai Group had tried to break into the dairy and finance markets, only to lose everything. Their market value was nearly halved, and only recently had they recovered enough to pivot into real estate, a move likely led by some ambitious, unknown executive. For years, housing prices had been soaring, drawing government scrutiny and heavy regulations to curb the growth. Real estate was already becoming a sunset industry. Entering now was either madness or a desperate attempt to grab one last fortune. Thinking of Wangshe, real estate's fate, and Yunhai's internal power struggles, Qinyang suspected it was the latter, since he had already offended them. He couldn't just sit back. Waiting for trouble to find him wasn't his style. He preferred to strike first. His gaze drifted toward the cheapest technologies in his system. Healthy water enhancement was 5,000 points, the system's review suggested. Buying a gene purification liquid instead. Then there was food and beverage formula optimization, also 5,000 points. Now, that was interesting. The system called it a tool for a lazy life, but Qinyang saw it differently. With these two, crushing Yunhai would be child's play. In fact, he wouldn't just be fighting them. He'd be challenging global beverage giants. Poor Yunhai would just be collateral damage, crushed like a fish washed up on the shore. With a mysterious smile, he checked his $10 million balance and began searching for an old classmate's number. Hey, Gongzi, he said when the call connected. I heard your hometown is a famous longevity village with amazing water. He mentioned the natural reservoir there and explained that since he was currently unemployed, he was preparing to start his own business. Suddenly, he saw 4 people standing outside. One was just about to knock. Both sides jumped in surprise. Seeing 2 burly men in front of him, Qinyang instinctively stepped back. Only then did he spot Zhao Jiangwo standing behind them. Qinyang breathed a sigh of relief, though Zhao was equally startled. Before the banker could speak, he noticed the bag on Qinyang's back. Zhao Jiangwo asked where he was going, and we can't really blame him for being nervous. After all, next to the Yunhai group, he was the person with the most to lose. In an effort to impress young Master Hu, Zhao had taken it upon himself to handle the aftermath, even going so far as to write Qinyang a formal letter of commitment. At the time, he only cared about looking good in front of the boss, but later, the weight of his actions began to sink in. To be honest, he was terrified. He had essentially handed over evidence that could land him in prison just to show off. Was it really worth it? Naturally, he scrambled to find 2 capable veterans for protection. After personally selecting a suitable accountant, he rushed over just to be safe, only to run into Qinyang looking exactly like a man about to skip town. "Don't you want that 80 million? Zhao Jiangwo asked with a trembling voice. Qinyang looked at him with genuine surprise, wondering why the man was so shaken. He quickly realized what was happening and remarked that these must be the bodyguards and the accountant. He noted that Zhao was being a bit premature since the money hadn't even arrived yet. He made it clear that the money currently in his pocket was his own and didn't need managing. Zhao Jiangwo breathed a quiet sigh of relief and forced a smile. He explained that it would only be a few days anyway. Once Qinyang decided on a project and finished the preparations, the funds would be approved immediately upon request. Since these people were on a fixed salary, it cost the same whether they started now or later, and besides, it was all for Qinyang's safety, or so Zhao claimed. Qinyang didn't believe a word of it, knowing Zhao was only protecting that incriminating letter. He explained he was just visiting an old classmate to scout a potential project. He assured the banker he wasn't running away and was actually more anxious to start than anyone. Zhao insisted he take them along for safety, convenience, and care. He even suggested that any dirty or tiring work could be handed off to the 4th person in the group. As he spoke, Zhao pointed to the young woman standing by his side. Qinyang looked up and saw a girl with a round face and a hint of baby fat, dressed in professional attire that couldn't hide her youthful energy. She was strikingly beautiful in a way that grew on you the more you looked, a genuine beauty through and through. But dirty and tiring work. Qinyang wondered if old Zhao was trying to play some kind of joke on a newly wealthy man. Meanwhile, the girl looked up, her large eyes filled with curiosity and a hint of anger. "Hello, I'm Lu Wangshu," she said. "From now on, I'll be your secretary, assistant, accountant, and life manager." It was quite the list of titles for one person. She added that her governor had ordered her not to leave his side, hoping he would accept. Her voice was soft, though she secretly hoped Qinyang would refuse. She certainly didn't want this job, but since she was the one who had made a mistake earlier, Zhao Jiangwo had assigned her this task without giving her a choice. She couldn't even quit. If she ran away from her mistakes now, she knew her father would never let her hear the end of it for years to come. Besides, if she were to quit and run away now, word would surely get out, and she would be utterly humiliated in front of her friends and family. She couldn't bear the thought of being laughed at for years. "We can almost hear the gossip. Did you hear about the girl at the bank who messed up that transfer?" The thought of being known as the one who lost 80 million and then fled made her skin crawl. Taking a deep breath, Lu Wangshu looked at Qinyang. She blinked, her eyes filled with a quiet curiosity. She had only made a simple mistake, yet this man had turned it into a series of world-shaking maneuvers. Even her own father, a man who rarely praised anyone, had called him a genius. She wondered if someone so young could truly be that brilliant. And where did he get such courage? She asked herself if there really were people who could seize an opportunity so recklessly, without a single moment of hesitation. Didn't he feel any doubt or uncertainty? After all, one wrong step could lead straight to prison. While she was lost in thought, Qinyang finally recognized her voice. That familiar, distinct voice brought a sudden realization to him. "Oh," he said, "you're the one who sent the money to the wrong account, aren't you?" Lu Wangshu's face darkened instantly at the reminder. Zhao Jiangwo simply grunted, thinking that this little ancestor was better off bothering someone else for a change. The bank manager claimed his heart couldn't take any more shocks. Qinyang, however, was quite surprised and pulled old Zhao aside to whisper a question. "Aren't you afraid she'll turn around and bankrupt me?" he asked. Zhao Jiangwo's expression shifted slightly as he began to have his own doubts, though he kept a straight face. He forced a smile and explained that he had seen her records when she transferred in. She was a top-tier university graduate with every accounting certification imaginable. To be honest, he had originally found it hard to believe such a talent would come to their small branch instead of a major investment firm or one of the big 4. Now, he told Qinyang that this must be a gift from heaven. "You are the strategist and she is the vanguard," he said. "A perfect match." Secretly, Zhao wondered why someone with such a resume was so unreliable in practice. He briefly considered replacing her, but they were already here. He figured any mistakes she made would be manageable, and besides, he was sure a cunning fellow like Qinyang could handle her. With that settled, Zhao Jiangwo dropped the formalities and spoke to Qinyang one last time to finalize the arrangement. "So, you're making sure I can't run away, right?" Qinyang teased. He sighed and agreed to take them, noting it was just a few more mouths to feed and beds to find. Zhao bid him farewell, mentioning he had to see off young Master Hu and Boss Wang, whose business meeting was likely wrapping up by now. As Zhao hurried away, Qinyang felt a slight jolt of concern at the news. It seemed young Master Hu was planning to profit from both sides of the deal. No wonder he was so generous with that 10 million. He was likely planning to rake in even more from Wang Yaozu. It was a calculated move. Offending the Yunhai Group was no small matter, and Xinyang realized his own millions in profit might not even be worth their notice, despite his efforts. Still, since Wang Yaozu only survived the crisis by letting others take the pressure, sacrificing some future profits seemed fair enough. It was time to move. We set off for the Jingjiang New District in Yongcheng, where the Yunhai Group building stands tall. It is a striking sight, unlike their many factories. While their plants are scattered across the province, this headquarters doesn't handle production. Instead, it manages sales, logistics, and the group's complex financial networks. The empire was founded by the late Qi Yunhai. In the beginning, the Yunhai Group was a strictly family-run business, entirely under the Qi family's control. That changed a few years ago when Qi Yunhai passed away, leaving his eldest son in charge. And as we often see, ambition can be a double-edged sword. The eldest son had grand designs, investing heavily to build this skyscraper and inviting outside capital to help the group expand into the world of high finance. He intended to conquer new industries like livestock and financial services, but he tried to run before he could walk. To be honest, he overreached significantly. In just 3 years, the Yunhai Group suffered massive defeats across these new sectors, seeing its total assets slashed in half despite going public. The subsequent equity splits further diluted the family's power, leaving the once mighty dynasty vulnerable to the very investors they had invited in. Now, most of the shares are held by various capital groups. While the eldest Qi brother is still the chairman in name, he has been effectively sidelined. The real power now lies with the CEO, a professional manager named Fan Wenping. Fan is a man in his 40s, currently in the prime of his career. Having served as an executive at several major firms, his outstanding reputation led the investors to join forces and recruit him specifically for this role. He is described as young, cautious, and full of energy, a man with a sharp eye for detail and a masterful grasp of the bigger picture. That, at least, is how headhunters describe him. After taking over, he used the investors' influence to consolidate his power with startling efficiency. In a mere 2 months, he completed a total internal restructuring, carrying out massive layoffs and streamlining the core staff into a leaner machine. He even used the transition to finish stripping the chairman of any real authority. One has to admit, the man's ability to command trust is quite remarkable. With the backing of the board and the support of the remaining employees, Fan Wenping's word is now law within the company. Meanwhile, an internal meeting begins. The large screen displays a detailed breakdown of recent events, using text and images to explain the situation to the gathered executives. The full story is laid out before everyone. A woman in a formal suit speaks calmly, explaining that this is exactly how the situation unfolded. She notes that while she never agreed with the group dabbling in the volatile real estate industry, the damage has already been done. We hear her insist that they cannot allow the Yunhai Group's reputation to be trampled, as it would cause investors to lower their valuation of the company. She demands a solution from the Qi family and the board. However, Qi Yuming, looking quite frustrated, snaps that Supervisor Zhang Wanning talks too much. Wanning remains expressionless, coldly asking if she is truly the one talking too much. She remarks that those without ability shouldn't act. She adds that the more a fool does, the more they fail, losing face for everyone. She pointedly asks Supervisor Qi for his thoughts on that. Yuming stands up in a rage, but Fan Wenping gestures for him to stop. He calmly tells them to sit down and focus on a solution instead of bickering. The eldest Qi brother, Chairman Qi Ruihua, tells Yuming to listen and sit. Below them, the other executives breathe a collective sigh of relief. The power struggle at the top is clearly weighing on them. Someone mentions that their contacts have signaled pressure from above, and Vice President Zhou is powerless. According to their investigation, the official in charge of Dongjiang's finance and economy was the one who made the call. Another executive asks about mediation. Ruihua looks toward Fan Wenping, who explains that mediation is impossible now. Some matters involve things far deeper than mere profit. Wenping shakes his head, calling it a series of unfortunate coincidences. Yuming, however, isn't ready to give up, especially looking at a familiar face on the screen. He grinds his teeth in hatred, wondering if this is all revenge. To be honest, he thinks seeking such heavy vengeance over one woman is excessive. From this day forward, the Qi family's control over the group has dropped another level. In his mind, he blames that woman for everything. He feels an urge to go back and lash out at her. Meanwhile, an executive asks what else they can do if they don't give up. A foreign-educated manager remarks that while capital can usually bulldoze its way through, local rules and connections are a different matter entirely. Fan Wenping waves his hand again. He admits that while the losses from the Wang family's real estate venture are significant, they are still manageable. He clarifies that it isn't that they can't afford the loss, but rather that they cannot afford to lose face. Losing to an ordinary, nameless family, one they had previously fired, is unacceptable. He tells them to figure out how to save their reputation. He warns that they must prevent their credit rating from being downgraded. As he speaks, the meeting room falls into a heavy, uneasy silence. The room remains quiet, and as Fan Wenping said, losing is normal, but losing to a nameless family isn't just annoying, it's a matter of pride. We see them grappling with how to save their credit rating. Outsiders need a story to believe, so they must keep the rumors under control. They must either convince the world that Yunhai Group's loss wasn't shameful, or remind everyone that they are not a group to be trifled with. Wenping dismisses the meeting, telling anyone with a plan to find him. After waiting a moment without an answer, he stands up impatiently. As soon as he and Chi Ruihua leave, the room erupts into a noisy chatter among the executives, who find the situation incredibly difficult. They note that the young man in the files is a total rogue, recently fired and reportedly ill, making it hard to even find a way to retaliate. One executive suggests exposing the truth behind the matter, but others call him crazy, insisting such things can only be discussed in private. After all, exposing it would involve too many powerful people. Unless the big bosses fall, such a move would be like kicking a mountain into a river. They agree that this path leads nowhere and wouldn't hurt the other side at all. If the word got out, they would simply become a laughingstock. To be outplayed by someone they kicked out of their own company is a bitter pill. Perhaps, they suggest, it's time for the old method, exaggeration. If they build the man up as a genius, their loss won't look so bad. However, some doubt if they can make people believe such a tall tale. Even if Kong Ming himself were reborn, people might not buy it. To be honest, the man's entire operation was already quite absurd to begin with. Looking back, the whole situation was utterly ridiculous, and he was only just starting to process it. That presentation had left him completely stunned, and to be honest, he was still in a total daze. His head is still spinning. He wonders who on earth decided to fire such a talent, calling the decision an utterly bizarre and illogical move. We return to the president's office, where Fan Wenping sits down and has his secretary pour tea while he rubs his temples in frustration. He has already considered the same solutions as the other executives, but finds them either impossible to execute or even more ridiculous if tried. In the business world, the art of hyping the enemy is common. The loser praises the winner's brilliance to save their own reputation. It makes the loser look magnanimous and suggests they didn't lose because they were weak, but because the opponent was simply too strong. It's a subtle way of surrendering while saving face, so everyone can move on. After all, there are no eternal enemies, only eternal interests. Business struggles are about profit. When you lose, you give up the profit, but there is rarely a need to become lifelong enemies. The head of the technical development department claims to have a solution and is waiting outside. Fan Wenping is surprised, remembering that Chen Yang was actually in that very department. Since this supervisor was the one who fired him, Wenping decides to see what he has to say and has the secretary bring him in. A young man walks in, standing tall in sharp, professional attire. He carries himself with an air of absolute confidence, as if he already holds the winning hand. Wenping notes that it's rare for someone so young to reach a supervisor position without being part of the chief family. He wonders if the company has hidden talents. He begins to worry that his past negligence allowed a strategist like Chen Yang to leave, while leaving other capable minds to languish in obscurity. Wenping quietly decides it's time for a full talent audit of the group. To be honest, his perspective on business has shifted significantly today. After witnessing Chun Yang's absurdly brilliant maneuvers, the usual, plain business tactics now seem almost amateurish to him. It's a strange feeling, really. He used to think the classic tales of the Three Kingdoms were exaggerated, believing that without perfect information, no one could truly plan so far ahead. But today, he feels he should read those classics again. Between pulling chestnuts from the fire and forming complex alliances, Chen Yang has just given him a masterclass. The young man greets him confidently, and Wenping finds himself eager to listen. He mentions that the secretary said a solution had been found. He tells the supervisor to speak freely, promising not to blame him regardless of whether the plan is feasible. Wenping is being unusually humble, almost like a student. The young man is visibly excited by the president's attention. He begins with an apology, acknowledging his role as the head of the technical department. He admits he was the one who approved Chun Yang's dismissal, claiming he feared the man's illness would cause accidental losses to the company if he stayed. He expresses deep regret for the current situation, feeling responsible since the trouble came from his own subordinate. It's a bitter irony, he suggests. He calls Chun Yang's actions hateful, especially since the company gave him a generous severance. He seems personally offended by the man's success. Because Chun Yang was his former employee, he investigated immediately after the news broke. He discovered that Chun Yang had mentioned buying unfinished buildings in a private chat. He argues that since few people knew the plan against Wang Real Estate, there must be a leak. He suggests they can frame it as a theft of trade secrets. He proposes sending Chun Yang and the leaker to prison, but Wenping shakes his head in disappointment. That plan, quite simply, won't work. Wenping points out that too many people knew about the move, and since it was mostly the Chi family using their influence, no actual trade secrets were stolen. The young man's eyes flicker with a different kind of intensity. He reveals that he has already tracked Chun Yang's current whereabouts. The young man explains that Chun Yang is currently at Yueming Lake in Wei County. Since he's already ill, if someone were to give him a little push, but Fan Wenping feels a sudden sense of dread. He asks if the man has gone somewhere else, wondering if the supervisor has actually hired people to follow him. The young man simply shakes his head, and for a moment, Wenping breathes a sigh of relief. But then, the young man smiles and reveals he has all of Chun Yang's data and his address. He has already hired 5 men to follow him, and now he only needs the president's command. He suggests that those 5 men can find a secluded spot and push Chun Yang into the lake. It would be silent and invisible, and naturally, no one would ever suspect the company. He argues that this wouldn't just be a lesson for Chun Yang. It would ensure that no one else would dare to look down on the Yunhai group ever again. A bold plan, in his mind at least. Suddenly, Wenping stands up and slams his hand onto the desk with a loud bang. His face turns a deep shade of red as he roars at the man to get the hell out of his office. The young supervisor stands there, completely stunned by the reaction. He is frozen in place, unable to comprehend why his perfect solution has sparked such a violent outburst. Wenping demands to know who hired this man and whose department he belongs to. He wonders if this is the Qi family's doing, if they are the ones behind such dark tactics. In a fit of absolute rage, he orders that everyone involved be fired immediately. The secretary, hearing the shouting, quickly rushes away to carry out the command. Wenping takes a moment to catch his breath, but his anger doesn't subside. He paces back and forth, picks up a water cup to take a drink, but then smashes it against the floor in frustration. He curses under his breath, thinking about how he'd heard the Qi family played dirty, but he never imagined it was this dark. He is a professional manager, after all, not a criminal. The idea that they wanted to drag him into their underworld tactics makes his blood boil. The more he thinks about it, the more furious and the more terrified he becomes. He realizes how lucky it was that he asked for a specific plan instead of just offering a reward for a solution. If he hadn't, Chun Yang might already be at the bottom of a lake. The realization that he could have become an unintended mastermind of a crime leaves him in a cold sweat. Shaking, he picks up the phone and dials a number. He calls Supervisor Zhang Wanning, telling her to come to his office immediately. He explains that he's discovered internal issues and there will be more layoffs to handle. After hanging up, Wenping sits down and rubs his temples. He can't understand these people. The company doesn't even belong to them, yet they are willing to risk lives for it. He wonders what kind of benefits the Qi family could have possibly promised for such loyalty. Meanwhile, at Yueming Lake, the autumn wind blows softly across the water. We see Chun Yang sitting cross-legged on a small boat, looking quite relaxed. Beside him, Ru Wang is busy checking things on her own to pass the time. Chun Yang opens his phone, intending to check in with his old classmate, but instead, he finds a flood of WeChat messages from the accountant, Sun Miao. The messages are a chaotic mess, with Sun Miao practically screaming through the text. Chun Yang, you bought an entire building? Didn't you buy that ruin because you were too poor for a real house? The group chat is exploding with disbelief, and it seems no one is willing to let the matter rest. A technician named Wang Qi chimes in, wondering how young Master Chun could be so rich when he was just asking them for loans. To be honest, the irony isn't lost on anyone. Zhang Feng from sales suggests he was just experiencing life, noting that while some are born to toil, others are just pretending, even if they play the part well. Another colleague, Zhao Nan, laments not lending him money earlier, feeling he missed a golden chance to cling to a billionaire's co-attorney. But Chun Yang has more than just group chats to deal with. He finds a frantic private message from the accountant, Sun Miao, who is practically begging, Big brother, grandpa, dad, please, I beg you, don't tell anyone I leaked that data to you. She warns him that he has no idea what kind of earth-shattering storm he's caused. The entire Yunhai group is in an absolute state of boiling chaos because of him. The leadership is reportedly losing their minds with rage. Chun Yang simply replies with a calm, okay, and a promise of a future reward before moving to the next message. This one is from his former department head, demanding to know why he did it and lecturing him about how he should be grateful to the company. A bit late for a performance review, one might say. Chun Yang replies with a blunt idiot before blocking him. Then, he sees a message from Jean Yalin, the woman who has already caused him enough trouble. She's hysterical, demanding to know where he got the money and accusing him of being a stingy liar for not giving it all to her. Because, in her mind, that makes perfect sense. She continues her rant, claiming he'll never compare to the Qi family no matter how much wealth he has. Chun Yang's eyes twitch with annoyance as he prepares a final response. He tells her he didn't give her everything. He still has one thing left. Since her mother hasn't been well, he offers to send over her mother's ashes later. Then, he blocks her too. It was a swift, decisive end to that conversation. What a piece of work, Chun Yang sighs to himself. Just then, his phone rings, and he spots someone waving from the shore. The boat pulls in quickly to pick up the newcomer. As the man steps aboard, he looks around the small vessel with a look of genuine surprise. He seems completely taken aback by the setting. Chun Yang smiles and gestures toward the vast expanse of Yueming Lake. Gongzi, I'm planning to build a water plant here to produce drinks and mineral water. What do you think? Gongzi stares at him as if he's grown a second head. Are you joking? He asks. Setting aside everything else, this is just a lake. He points out that while the lake connects to an underground river and Wei County is known for longevity, there are no actual minerals here. It's just plain river water. He even mentions seeing someone relieving themselves by the shore earlier, doubting anyone would buy it. But Chun Yang's goal is exactly that, to turn the impossible into reality. On the surface, Chun Yang looks confident, but deep down he's grumbling that he couldn't afford a more reliable location anyway. His friend is left wondering what on earth is going on. Gongzi sits down, completely dazed, looking back and forth between Lu Wangshu, the two bodyguards, and Chen Yang. To be honest, it all feels like a bizarre dream to him. Wasn't this guy just a love-struck underdog recently? How did he suddenly strike it rich? Chen Yang gazes at the sun-drenched, shimmering lake and notes that it's a natural reservoir. He asks why it hasn't been turned into a scenic area yet. Are you for real? Gongzi asks, still struggling to believe his ears, though he begins to explain the situation. Yongcheng is a provincial capital with plenty of attractions, and while Wei County is under its jurisdiction, it's simply too remote. Most of the local youth have left for the city. With the local economy stagnant, tourism is a tough sell. We see that while the reservoir is beautiful, its isolation makes any large-scale development a risky investment. The county government considered it before, but after a cost-benefit analysis, they gave up on the idea. It just wasn't worth the massive construction required. However, if he truly wants to lease this entire reservoir, the price won't be low. Gongzi knows this well, as he works within the local government system. Wei County is his hometown, and he returned there to work after graduation, making him an expert on local affairs. How much? Chen Yang asks directly. Gongzi frowns slightly, thinking it over, noting that a specific price is hard to pin down. The reservoir is a decent size, but it has its limitations. Because it connects to an underground river, it's useless for aquaculture. A few years ago, someone else wanted to lease it but backed out after an expert inspection. At the time, the county's asking price was roughly 20 million for a 30-year lease. Yangzi, stop joking, Gongzi says, unable to hold back any longer. He asks where the money is coming from, insisting that even if he has it, he shouldn't waste it like this. He urges Chen Yang to just have dinner and head back to Yongcheng. He doesn't want to see his friend's money go down the drain. Chen Yang just laughs, telling him he has absolute confidence. Don't you know what I do? He asks. He argues that he wouldn't start a business without a solid foundation. Gongzi hesitates, remembering Chen Yang's former employer, the Yunhai Group. That company built its empire on mineral water. He wonders if Chen Yang has somehow mastered some kind of core, secret technology. But then he realizes, what kind of core technology could there possibly be for bottled water? Gongzi remains utterly baffled. You're really not joking? Really not. The term remains 30 years. Chen Yang nods and turns to Lu Wangshu, telling her to go negotiate a deal for 20 years at under 10 million. Lu Wangshu points at herself in total disbelief. Chen Yang rubs his chin, noting that she is currently the only great general under his command. If she doesn't go, who will? As she prepares to argue, Chen Yang suggests she could always call her bank president and ask for a replacement. Faced with that ultimatum, Lu Wangshu immediately lowers her head, feeling both conflicted and aggrieved. She wants to argue, but she simply can't, knowing her bank president's orders. The president made it clear, if she's replaced, she can pack her bags and leave. That's a reality she isn't ready to face. Fine, I'll go, she thinks, steeling herself. Lu Wangshu grits her teeth and heads off to handle the proposal, taking Zheng Chong with her. Chen Yang just shrugs, knowing full well he isn't exactly a natural-born businessman. This whole plan is like pulling chestnuts from a fire. Regardless of what others think, he's only doing this because he isn't afraid of failure, and he has the system's backing. All that talk about strategic brilliance and master planning? It's mostly nonsense. He's just an ordinary man who happens to have a very extraordinary secret. He has always believed in one simple rule. Let the professionals handle the professional work while he stays out of the way. To be honest, it's a solid strategy. Compared to a financial elite like Lu Wangshu, Chen Yang feels his only job is to lie back, provide the crushing technology, and then start counting the profits. He doesn't care for the messy details. Let's go grab a drink, Chen Yang suggests. Gongzi, however, is starting to feel a bit worried about the whole situation. He asks if it's really okay to let her go alone, suggesting they should check in. Trust her, Chen Yang says, pulling Gongzi toward a lakeside farmhouse restaurant. They eat and drink until late afternoon, when Lu Wangshu and Zheng Chong finally return. She looks utterly exhausted as she slumps into a chair. Looking at the leftovers on the table, she feels even more mistreated. She's been working for hours without a bite to eat, only to return to cold scraps. She wonders what kind of miracle boss she's ended up with. Is it done? Chen Yang asks. Lu Wangshu sighs, reporting that she got the price down to 9 million. That's for 20 years. She explains that the officials wouldn't go any lower, and they clearly didn't want to let a big spender like him get away. They want to sign the contract as soon as possible. Impressive, a true professional, Chen Yang says, giving her a thumbs up before ordering the owner to bring fresh dishes. This finally makes Lu Wangshu feel a bit better. Seeing Chen Yang's genuine praise, she can't help but let a small smile tug at the corners of her mouth. After lunch, Chen Yang calls a car to drop Gongzi home before taking the other three straight to the county office. Mr. Chen, a pleasure to meet you. The man greeting him is a middle-aged, balding gentleman named Lu. He's the vice county magistrate in charge of investment promotion for Wei County. He has a very approachable, friendly face. Once both parties are seated and the agreement is reviewed, Chen Yang signs his name with total composure. Vice Magistrate Lu steps forward to shake Chen Yang's hand, smiling as he mentions he heard the reservoir is for a water plant. He offers the county's full support. He hands over his business card, telling Qinyang to ask for anything. "You're too kind," Qinyang replies, noting that the reservoir is just the first step. Qinyang adds that food and beverage processing plants will also be launched soon, hoping the county will give them the green light. Vice Magistrate Liu beams with joy at the prospect. He explains that Wei County being near the provincial capital is a mixed blessing. It's good for workers who don't have to travel far, but there is a downside to this proximity. The downside is that it's hard for the county town to stand out. Now that someone wants to build a factory, it's a win, even if the industry chosen seems a bit absurd at first glance. After saying their goodbyes, Qinyang returns to the hotel with the other three. He takes a photo of the contract and sends it straight to Zhao Jiangwo. President Zhao calls back almost immediately, sounding breathless. "Brother, you're joking, right? 9 million for a reservoir." To be honest, the president sounds more than a little agitated. He reminds Qinyang they agreed on an industry that was easy to hype but hard to verify. "What on earth can a broken reservoir do for us?" he asks, fearing the whole thing will collapse. He claims that not even the highest powers would dare lend 80 million on this. Qinyang simply replies that the water quality is excellent. "Drink it, and you'll live longer." President Zhao is left speechless by this bold claim. "Brother," he sighs, feeling as though he's being led on a wild goose chase. Qinyang explains it's not just purified water, but a processed version that benefits the body. It's less like water and more like a health supplement, a genuine one, at that. The system's evaluation of this product is simple. Buying it is second only to buying gene purification liquid, which, naturally, tells us everything we need to know. This means the water possesses some of the effects of that purification liquid. It might be less than 1%, or even just 1,000th of the potency. But in the end, it is effective. Unfortunately, since his points haven't arrived yet, Qinyang can't produce a sample. The two of them go back and forth for over 10 minutes. Neither can convince the other. Eventually, Zhao Jiangwo gives up, feeling utterly drained. He wants to be harsher, but he knows he has to tread carefully. He remembers that Qinyang holds a certain leverage over him. If the kid snaps under the pressure and reports him, it's all over. Luckily, he had the foresight to plan ahead. He tells himself that as long as Lu Wangshu is guarding the money as his assistant, things shouldn't go too far south. It's a small comfort in a stressful situation. His backup plan is simple. If losses start, he'll withdraw the remaining loan, seize the factory, and sell it off. He figures he might lose some, but not everything. He reminds himself he's doing this for young Master Hu. Surely, Hu will pull him out of the fire later. Even if he loses his presidency, it's better than going to prison. With that grim thought, Zhao Jiangwo's face turns pale. He weakly tells Qinyang that he'll have Lu Wangshu prepare the documents, and that he should be ready. The funds will be dispersed within 3 days. "Think carefully," he warns. "If you can't pay it back, you'll end up in a cell." He hangs up, leaving Qinyang to his thoughts. Qinyang doesn't dwell on the risks. He knows his black technology will crush the competition. Meanwhile, President Zhao sits in his office, his heart heavy with deep regret. After a moment of contemplation, he calls Hu Guangyu. "Young Master Hu, it's like this. I think I'm finished. That kid isn't a good person at all. He has no idea how to do business." "Yes, thank you. I swear it's the truth. That boy lacks any shrewd business sense. He borrowed 80 million just to sell bottled water. Can you believe it?" "All right, I understand." Meanwhile, in a residential area in Yongcheng, Hu Guangyu hangs up the phone, looking utterly perplexed. At the dining table nearby, an elderly man is slowly sipping his porridge. Seeing his expression, the elder asks if there's a problem. "It's nothing major," Guangyu replies, frowning as he explains the whole situation. He admits that he previously thought Qinyang was worth befriending, but this move makes no sense. Spending 80 million on bottled water is madness. The national market is already saturated with big brands. Even here in Dongjiang province, the giant Yunhai Group has a firm grip on the entire beverage market. Doing this is practically suicide. Extraordinary people do extraordinary things, the old man says, slowly wiping his mouth. When you're old, nothing seems strange anymore. Madmen have their own methods, and the winner takes all. He advises not to look at what he's doing, but at the results he achieves. If he isn't a fool, he must have a foundation for such confidence. Now, it's just a matter of seeing if that confidence makes him worth knowing. "You're right, grandfather," Guangyu realizes. The next day, after staying in Wei County, the four of them take the high-speed rail back to Yongcheng. As Lu Wangshu puts it, since everything is ready, it's time to start hiring. She knows Qinyang doesn't understand corporate management, so they need professionals. He agrees, yet he still sleeps in until 10 in the morning. By the time they reach the job market, it's already 11:30. Some companies are already packing up their booths to leave. Wangshu can't help but complain. "I told you to wake up earlier. Now look, it's over. How are we supposed to recruit anyone?" "It's all about fate," Qinyang replies. He compares it to sifting beans. The small ones fall through early, but the big ones have more pride and won't settle for mediocre benefits. He doesn't seem to care at all. Since the money hasn't arrived yet, a day early or late makes no difference. With his technology, any competent hire will succeed. Wangshu goes to rent a booth and sets up a temporary sign, while Qinyang sits down casually. People passing by notice the scene, and their eyes light up, yet few dare to step forward. After all, with an assistant and bodyguards standing there like gate gods, the setup doesn't look like they're hiring ordinary people. However, there are always exceptions. A few minutes later, A middle-aged man with a scruffy beard and a weary, disheveled air walks up and plops down. He asks what positions are open, and Qinyang simply says they're hiring for everything. What do you want to do? Qinyang asks. The man laughs, asking if they need a general manager and if he fits the bill. I think you'll do, Qinyang replies. He pulls out a contract and places it on the table, telling the man to sign it. This was a contract Lu Wangshu had prepared for the company Vice County head Lu helped set up. The man freezes in surprise, and even Wangshu is stunned. To be honest, she couldn't believe Qinyang was being this casual. Qinyang just smiles and asks if he's afraid. What's there to be afraid of? The man says, flipping through the document. He sees it's for Shinhai Silver Food and Beverage, a company founded just yesterday in Wei County. It's clearly in the early stages of development. He asks what the salary will be, but Qinyang simply shakes his head and says he has no idea what the man is worth. However, Qinyang adds, you certainly know your own value. You can write in the salary yourself. As long as you are confident enough, even $1 million a year is fine. The man, Zhang Lihai, can't help but laugh. After suffering failures in both his career and personal life, he had been brooding at home for 2 months. He never expected to meet a madman. But perhaps a madman is exactly what he needs. While everyone else saw his life as a total failure, this complete stranger was willing to trust him and give him a chance. A sudden surge of ambition rises within him, and deep down, he feels a flicker of genuine emotion. He tells Qinyang that he won't regret this decision. Lihai writes, general manager, for the position and sets his annual salary at 800,000. He then drops the pen, declaring that for his value, this price is actually quite low. He promises to prove his worth, and Qinyang gives him a thumbs up for his confidence. Qinyang then stands up and tells Lihai to take his seat. Lihai is confused, wondering what he's supposed to do. Recruit people, of course, Qinyang explains. He admits he has no experience in hiring and prefers to leave it to a professional. Hearing this, Lihai is even more moved. To be given such authority immediately after signing a contract is a level of trust he hadn't expected. It was, quite frankly, unheard of. He sits down in the recruiter's chair and tells his new boss to rest easy. Since he's been trusted, he just needs to know which positions need filling. He'll handle the rest. Qinyang explains that the company currently consists only of the boss, an assistant, 2 bodyguards, and Lihai himself as the sole employee. The rest is up to him. Upon hearing this, Lihai's excitement vanishes as a cold reality sets in. He suddenly feels very sober. In any normal situation, this would have seemed extremely suspicious. He begins to wonder if he's been scammed. Is this just a rich kid's hobby or some hollow shell company? The boss is young, casual, and seemingly reckless. The company has a beautiful assistant and 2 bodyguards before it even has a staff. He asks himself if this is even a serious business or just some elaborate game. Qinyang simply pats him on the shoulder and offers a bit of encouragement. He tells him this is a rare opportunity, a chance to build something from the ground up. He tells Lihai that the chance to build a company from nothing is rare, and he should cherish the opportunity to lead it from zero. Once he completes this setup, his resume will be legendary. Though Lihai wonders why he shouldn't just start his own business instead. Lihai instinctively argues the point, but Qinyang simply asks if he actually has the money. That silence, quite frankly, says it all. Lihai is speechless. Qinyang just smiles, saying they're going to lunch and will bring him something back before leading Wangshu and the others away. Lihai clenches his fists, wondering why on earth he felt moved by this. This boss is truly something else, but he decides to wait and see. For now, he'll just observe the situation and see where this strange path leads. Meanwhile, we see Qinyang ordering at a high-end hot pot restaurant. A single meal here costs at least 2,000 or 3,000 yuan. Compared to his past, he's spending money like water now. Qinyang feels a wave of emotion, reflecting on his previous life and his current self. When had he ever been this extravagant? In his past life, he was always busy working, never having a moment of rest just to earn a pittance. He spent his days paying off mortgages or acting like a servant to others, working himself to death without enjoying a single good day. Now, we might call this revenge spending. It's not just about the money. After facing death twice, Qinyang has gained a new perspective. He realizes that everything else is hollow. Perhaps living in the moment without regrets is the only truth. And who could blame him, really? In this life, even without the system, he had decided to live freely. However, to Wangshu, Qinyang's behavior seems rather eccentric. After spending 2 days together, Wangshu has an inexplicable feeling. He grew up in a good environment and has met many different types of people. His father's constant lectures made him mature early, and he's always been confident in his ability to read people and see their true nature. But when it comes to Qinyang, he feels lost. If seizing millions from a mistaken payment was a display of brilliant, calculated strategy, then the psychological pressure Qinyang had to endure during that process must have been absolutely staggering. This suggests Qinyang is a man of great skill, wisdom, and a strong heart, someone with incredible courage who acts without being bound by rules. Usually, when such a person gains power, shouldn't they be controlling the board and rapidly building their empire to achieve their life's ambitions? Wangshu has heard of such figures before, often operating in the shadows or building massive industries with singular focus. Such figures are often found behind the rise of major industries or corporations, and without exception, they tend to move with ruthless speed. They are usually hypervigilant and deeply suspicious, yet somehow, Qinyang is different. One moment, he's securing millions, and the next, he's taking out loans. While using credit to grow is normal, his decision to jump into the bottled water business is truly bizarre. Even more absurd is how he seems to want no part in managing it, having sent Wang Shu to handle the handover with Wei Chen just yesterday. Wang Shu can't help but ask what his boss's actual dream is. Qinyang laughs, noting that usually, it's the boss who sells dreams to employees. He jokingly asks if Wang Shu is trying to manipulate him instead. Wang Shu quickly clarifies that he simply doesn't understand Qinyang's recent actions. He wants to know what the goal is. Seeing Wang Shu's sincerity, Qinyang turns serious and admits his goals are actually quite simple. Before yesterday, he explains, his dream was merely to own a house, have a decent car, and keep enough savings so life wouldn't be so miserable. But now, things have changed. When Wang Shu curiously asks how, we see Zheng Chang and Wang Gang leaning in to listen as well. They already know what Qinyang has done, and while they admire him, they are equally curious about his plans for the future. They can certainly relate to his old goals. After all, a house, a car, and savings are the dreams of the vast majority of people. Qinyang holds up 3 fingers, stating he now has 3 new dreams. First, he wants to live comfortably without ever worrying about money. The 3 men nod in agreement. That is a very practical dream indeed. Second, he wants to see the view from the very top. He remarks that while modern technology and money can achieve almost anything today, there are still limits to what currently exists. Therefore, he intends to personally spark a technological revolution to realize his true value and lead human progress forward. The 3 men hesitate, as it sounds a bit like empty boasting, but they nod anyway, just in case their boss actually pulls it off.